Hello again. So if you haven't been following along, you may not know that my name is Kelly Slack, and I've been invited to guest teach by Heather of Pearly Shell Fiber Arts. I'm the co-owner of Black Sheep Fiber Emporium with my partner Tina, and I have 2 master's degrees in teaching, so I really love to teach. I'm a self-published author of Hoppy Feet, which is my sock book, and Froth and Foam, which is my lace book. And I've made over 100 pairs of socks, so while I don't know everything, I do know a lot. I know a lot about socks. And I love socks. I love making socks. Making socks is really fun. What else do I need to tell you? Oh yes, this segment. All of my videos are sponsored by these 3 people. That would be Black Sheep Fiber Emporium. I guess it's more than people. It's companies? I don't know. Kelly Slack Designs and Pearly Shell. So make sure that you are giving them some love by checking out their social media accounts. So they have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and even TikTok. Lots of fun, right? So today we are talking about top-down socks again. We're on the next section, and we are going to talk about the cuff and the leg of the sock. And I want to put this back up. Remember this from a few days ago? So we're talking about the cuff on a top-down sock and the leg portion right here. So this is before we get into the heel and the gusset. That'll be tomorrow's lesson. So we want to talk about this right here, correct? So the probably single most important thing to remember is that your cuff size is going to be relative to your leg size, and it will depend on how high your sock is. So if you like a taller sock and you have a thicker calf, it's going to take more stitches in your cuff than it will in your leg, because you'll slim it a little bit as you go down, right? You can make your cuff as narrow or wide as you'd like. I tend to use either knit 2 purl 2 like on this sock, or I will use knit 1 purl 1. I like knit 1 purl 1 a lot. Let me find one that has a knit 1 purl 1. That's a knit 2 purl 2. I have a whole pile of socks, and can I find one that's a knit 1 purl 1? There we go. There's one. This one's actually knit 1 through the back loop and then purl 1. So the key with socks is a lot of times you want ribbing at the top, and you want that ribbing because we all know that the action of our knits and our purls as they interlock, they make our ribbing, and when it makes that ribbing, it pulls it together and then stretches out so that it fits around and hugs the top of our calf or around our head or the sleeve cuffs. So that's why a lot of patterns are going to use ribbing at the top. And for me, my favorites are really knit 1 purl 1 and knit 2 purl 2. Sometimes I'll do a knit 2 purl 1 if I have a 6-stitch repeat, for example. And you can do all kinds of things with that. You can throw little tiny cables like on the every 3rd ribbing if you want, or you can put a little bit of lace in the top of your sock if you need a little more stretch. And socks are you know, made differently. So like this one, for example, this one has a lace top. It doesn't really have ribbing, it just has a lace top, right? And sorry, I'll put that back up. It still fits nicely, and it has that little bit of give from the yarn overs so that it fits around the top of my foot just a little bit better. So you don't have to do just a plain ribbed cuff. This one, for example, this one has like dragon scales that go up to the top of that cuff, and it fits fine, and it doesn't fall down too much. So you don't have to do just ribbing. You can do patterning. If you're doing cables, you'll need to make sure that you do more stitches than you think you need. If you're doing lace, you'll want to do a few less stitches than you think you need, and that's because, of course, lace stretches, whereas the cables don't. So the cables eat up some of the width that we have. When it comes to the patterning on your socks, so on your leg, there's lots and lots of different patterns, right? There's really simple ones like this one, where it's just essentially a tiny little cable on your sock. There's really fancy ones like this guy, really fancy socks where, you know, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. There's all kinds of different things that you can do with your socks. Here's a lace-ish pattern. Lace-ish pattern, because this one actually uses drop stitches to give you that extra space. This is a super stretchy sock, by the way. Really stretchy sock. So some patterns can definitely give you a lot more stretch. So when it comes to your top-down socks, the important things to remember are that if you are doing taller socks, so if we're doing a taller sock, then we need to make sure that we have more stitches at the top of that sock than we do as we narrow towards the ankle. So it's important to take a couple of different measurements and decide where you want your sock to sit. If you are just making like little short ankle socks, for example, you can do just like an inch of ribbing and then go right into making your heel and then head right down the foot of that sock. But if, for example, you're making like knee-high socks, then you're going to have to take more measurements down that leg so that you can make sure that it fits a little bit better around the top of the calf, but don't make it too tight. You'll have to add in just a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 more stitches right there so you can get it over your calf, because otherwise you'll get it stuck, right? It'll get stuck at the widest part of your calf. We don't want that to happen. So those are really important considerations when you are getting ready to do your top-down socks, when you have started with your cast on. I am making a tiny little like sock that would be appropriate for a keychain or a doll or something. Just a tiny little sock. I have my tiny little sock started right here. So I cast on 20 stitches and I did a knit 1, purl 1 rib, and you can see that my ribbing does pull in. And I think I did, what, 5 rows, 6 rows? I can count here. 5 rows. 5 rows of my tiny little ribbing on my tiny little sock, and then I started working just a plain stockinette sock down the leg so that when we get to the heel tomorrow, I can show you how to turn a very simple heel. All right. Other considerations. Let's see, I talked about cables, I talked about lace. Color work. Color work is another important one. So if you are doing color work socks, it's important to remember that your floats need to be loose. Your float should always be loose with color work. But it's also important to remember that you may need a little more give. You might want to add a couple of extra stitches into your color work socks, because color work socks are going to pull in a little bit and you want to make sure that they're going to fit. So with color work, you'll want to make sure you give it just a little bit more space. I don't know if I have any color work socks in here. I don't make a lot of color work socks. They aren't one of my favorite things. I think they're gorgeous to look at, but they aren't one of my favorite things to make. Honestly, I like making plain vanilla stockinette socks. That's like, if I'm going to make something, it's probably the first thing I'm going to make is just a plain vanilla stockinette sock. That or a rib sock. I do love rib socks as well. See, and this is just another, this is a lovely rib sock. Just ribbing all the way down. Just ribbing all the way down. But that does allow, if you use a ribbed sock, I should probably mention this as well. If you use a ribbed sock on a top-down sock, and you keep that ribbing and you work it all the way down the leg and down the foot, you'll find that it's going to fit a little bit closer because again, that ribbing will pull in. So if you're a little bit worried about the fit of a sock for a sock recipient, maybe it's the first pair of socks you've ever made them, then using a ribbed sock can be very forgiving because it's going to pull in and it's going to fit a little bit closer than what a sock would otherwise. So that's also a good idea. What else did I want to talk to you about when it came to cuffs? Lace versus cables versus color work, patterns, ribbing. Does anybody have questions? You know, I haven't asked that a lot, but if anyone has questions, I would love to answer them about anything that we've covered so far. Tomorrow we're going to get into heels, and we'll talk a lot about heels. And it's important that as you're coming down the cuff or leg of your sock, that as you prepare to move into your heel, you make sure that you have the right number of stitches. Because if you don't have the correct number of stitches, you're going to run into some issues building your heel and your gusset to make sure that it fits down around the ankle joint of your sock, or of your foot. Oh, ankle joint of your sock, that would be entertaining. So when you get to this point, it's really important right here that you make sure that you have the right number of stitches so that we can build our heel, and there's a number of different ways to build the heel, and I have a whole pile of socks that I'm hoping to go dig out, I'm pretty sure I know where I put them, from my Hoppy Feet book that illustrate lots of different socks, sock heels. So it's important that as you get to that point, that you have the right number of stitches so that you can build your gusset out into your heel to make sure that everything fits correctly. What else did I tell you? Measuring. So when it comes to measuring your socks, one of the best things that you can do is find yourself a sock ruler. I love these things. They're very, very handy because you can slide them in, set them in your heel, and you can very easily see how tall the leg of your sock is. And this one happens to be 9.5 inches all the way down in the base of that cuff, or of that heel. The other thing is that if you are going to measure, make sure that you're measuring on a flat surface. Measuring on your couch like arm or your chair arm or your leg is not going to give you an accurate measurement. You want to make sure that you are taking your sock and you're putting it on a flat surface in order to measure it, and that you are measuring it correctly. I find that having a firm ruler is usually a slightly better idea than having a soft one. You can definitely use a soft ruler for measuring your socks. I'm not saying don't. But you can have slightly less accurate results from a soft ruler than you might from a firm ruler. And again, you'll have much less accurate results if you're measuring on a curved surface as opposed to something nice and flat. So do make sure that when you are measuring your socks that you take that into account, because you want to make sure, if you're doing them one at a time, or even two at a time sometimes, if you're doing them one at a time, you want to make sure that your sock leg and cuff matches from sock to sock. Unless you don't like that, you may want to make sure that they don't match. Maybe you want asymmetrical socks. So it's important to measure anyway, that way you know for sure whether you want symmetric or asymmetric socks, right? And the other part of that is that when you're doing two at a time, sometimes you may not realize that you're just working one sock. And I know that doesn't seem possible, but you know, if you pick your socks up, put them down, pick your socks up, put them down, you may only end up working one sock. So you'll want to make sure that both of your socks are measuring the same, and that you continue to work back and forth if you're doing two at a time socks. Whether that's toe up or top down, even though we're focusing on top down right now. Oh, let's see, what else do I need to talk about? Oh, we'll talk about sock blockers. These are also fun when we get into washing socks, but I'll probably use these tomorrow when I illustrate the different heel types, and we'll get into all kinds of fun heels. There's a ton of fun heels out there. There's a ton of fun toes, and I hope that I should have my little tiny sock keychain ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and do the heel flap, so we'll just talk about a heel flap, and then I'll do the little tiny heel turn, and we'll pick up some stitches on a gusset tomorrow while we talk about all of those other heels that are available. I tend to use a slip stitch heel flap. It's just something I'm comfortable with, that I remember pretty easily, so that's what I tend to use. But if you find one that you love and you want to make that heel, you can always swap it out. Even if you know, your pattern calls for a different heel, and I'll talk about this again tomorrow, you can always swap that out. And that's another thing. If your pattern calls for different ribbing, you can change the ribbing. There's no reason you can't. Change the ribbing. You can change the patterning. You could add some stitches in. Like I said before, if you need to give yourself a little more space in the back of a calf, you can add a couple of stitches in there. So there's no reason to not change your pattern if it's going to help make it better for you and what you're doing. All right, we're at that point where I need to say, don't forget to go follow all of the sponsors for the segment. Check out their Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok channels. I really look forward to tomorrow and talking about heels. There's so many fun things to talk about with heels. And I can't wait to show you all the socks that I'm going to go dig out. Lots more socks. Not just, clearly I don't have just a box of socks. I have like a box of socks and a bag of socks and another bag of socks, because I love making socks, and I hope that you will too. And I hope that you are learning something with this series, and well, I'd love to see your socks, so feel free to send me messages and show me your socks, because I love to see your socks. Make sure that you're posting those in the Woolen Fiber Arts group as well on Facebook this year, so that, again, we can all see your socks, because I want to see your socks. So, until tomorrow, take care of yourself, and keep crafting, and be socky.